Of course, the whole reason why this book, What Kansas Means to Me, was chosen is this is the 150th anniversary of the statehood of Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Kansas Center for the Book chooses a book each year, and they chose this collection as reflective of the whole large story of Kansas. Yes, I know it was published back in the early 1990s, so it isn't as new as Nancy Picard's book that we did a couple years ago, Virgin of the Plains, I think that was called. So it's not as new as that and some of the others, but we know that it sort of gives us a little bit of history. So that's why that book was chosen. That's why we're doing this now. We do intend to continue to celebrate the 150th anniversary through the year. We're going to have a series of lectures at this library and at our other branches. I have a flyer for the first one we're going to do on April 4th, which is Kansas and the Civil War. It's a professor from Emporia.
Okay.
And we're going to be doing a few others in the fall. It's so hard to plan things in the spring and in the summer. So we'll be doing a few more about Kansas history and some things that would be of interest. So that's all part of our whole year-long celebration. But we do the book, the Center for the Book suggests we do the book between January 29th, the birthday of Kansas, and April 15th. So that's why we're doing the book right now.
Is he going to be here reading?
Yes, he's going to be here downstairs in the art gallery cafe for the discussion. And next Wednesday night, totally separate from the 150th anniversary, we have a recital downstairs. The Goldenberg duo, violinist and her brother, who is the head of the piano teaching music department at Northern Illinois University.
Wow.
And that's going to be downstairs also in the art gallery.
The Holy
Cafe area, yeah. So we're moving right along. I invite everyone to come to that.
That's cool.
So that having been said, Tom Averill himself says, the editor of the book, that he put together these ideas that Kansas means a variety of things to people, and I most enjoyed reading his introduction. As he says, it's an iconic as any State of the Union, whether seen positively or negatively. It is seen.
Signed by him.
There we go, and here's a copy signed, a friend of Barbara's, apparently.
Because, you know, he did win the Edgar Wolf Award. That's why I have it, because I used to be on that committee to those books. And he was a really interesting person. You know, he's a professor at Washburn, still there. But, you know, did you ever read what he wrote? It was so, I thought it was understandable and well written.
Yeah.
You know?
I really enjoyed
More
his-
so than a lot of the essays.
Yes. Yes, many of the essays were difficult.
But do you guys know very much about William Allen White?
No,
I
could
wish
you,
I
a
knew
bit,
more.
but could
I
you
used to
help
be
us
on the
more?
committee. And,
Okay.
and then one of the books we did at that time was this story of William Allen White. You know, he was just a really interesting person, you know, not your usual Kansas hayseed. I mean, he was a world traveler, and he, you know, even though he stayed in Emporia always, and he was editor of the Emporia Gazette, he still had connections around the world, and really interesting person that you wouldn't have thought in that era would have been in Kansas. You know what I mean? Stayed in Kansas. His big thing was he wanted to stay in Kansas. He could have gone somewhere else, but he thought, kind of like what this says several times, that Kansas is a kind of a barometer of the country, kind of, you know.
Several of the essayists made him sound like a real colorful, kind of rah-rah.
I think he was.
Bigger than life
Interesting person.
Well, wasn't he the one that apparently started the Bull Moose Party with Teddy Roosevelt?
I
When
think he did.
Teddy ran again in 1912?
He was a very good friend of
Yes,
Teddy
good friend of Teddy Roosevelt's,
Wow.
which is, you know, an
Very
interesting
colorful in
individual.
itself, yeah.
Just, yeah, exactly, a very colorful individual. So the reason that the William Allen White Prize then?
See, I just remember it from being a kid, and those were books we had to read. If you lived in Kansas,
Mhm.
and you went to
He was
school,
just
you had to
named in his
read.
honor.
You had to read those books.
there, okay.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Oh, thank you. If you'd like, Annette, my lunch is back there.
Oh.
Join us.
Very good.
I ate, but that's okay, I'll eat again.
Yeah, the way to do it.
Well, now, you bring up something because you said it's not your typical Kansas hayseed. I come from somewhere else.
And did you think of Kansas as hayseeds?
No, I didn't, but
Okay.
everybody, I feel as if I've been telling everybody about the geography, and I have to admit, I haven't been west of Manhattan. when we said we were moving here, everybody said, oh, Kansas, it's so flat. Just like, I think somebody, at the end, it's William Least Heat Moon says, the billiard table of the gods. Anyway, once we got here, I said, just for our first visit, it's beautiful. Granted, I realize this is the east and it's because of rivers, but then as we drove out towards Manhattan, was all of that,
Smoky
what you
Hills.
think of as the cowboy and all that beautiful topography. I don't know, I liked it a lot.
Or even in the
I think
Kansas
it's
City area.
really pretty.
You know,
The Kansas City area is beautiful.
Hilly, some
Yeah.
places.
Very hilly.
I think it's very hilly.
I ride my bike, I know.
I feel it, yeah. I
But
know
the
it's
perception of
Is
Kansas
flat
is
bad?
different.
Well, like, who
No,
was it?
who was it?
Inch. Like Inch said,
Yeah.
flat is bad, level is what Kansas is.
Right. Mhm.
Flat has the
Mhm.
connotation of being uninteresting, featureless,
Mhm.
but level
That's what,
is a good thing.
that's
But
what
you know,
thinks we should be, yes.
When I went to school out at Fort Hayes, we didn't have class on Friday.
Hayes is
And
flat,
so,
isn't it?
it gave me a chance to really explore the countryside. And Kansas is not flat, it rolls very gently, but it certainly wasn't flat. And, William Allen White said in this that, our climate never killed anyone. And,
Are they sure about that?
They didn't live here this long.
Or less.
Yeah.
The climate didn't,
Pardon me?
the climate didn't, was he going on with more than that there was?
Well, that's what he said. Talking about our extremes, you know.
Yes.
Which
And then he
extreme?
compared it with someplace else that was, in a different geographical area, but temperature was higher or it was
Yes.
lower.
Mhm.
And in reading, and I'll have to be truthful, I didn't have time to read all of the book, but I noticed that the people included in the book lived to great ages. Uh-huh, yeah.
There we go.
So,
So it
that
might be a
says
good
something,
thing, yeah.
I'm not sure what, but
Didn't kill anybody.
They stayed out of the way of the tornadoes.
But I can remember as a kid, and then later in life as an adult, Brinkley. Oh, yeah, and his radio station.
Could you tell us more about Brinkley? When I read that, I thought, do they mean who I think, Brinkley from television? What do they
They
mean
don't
by
David
Brinkley?
Brinkley, do they?
Well, he got run out of Kansas, I believe.
David Brinkley? Is that,
Uh-huh.
okay, I
didn't
didn't
know
know.
that.
And went to,
Why did they run him out?
pardon me,
Why did they run him out?
chicanery.
How did you know that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Um,
What'd you say?
He went to the border of Texas and New Mexico.
Yeah, I
and
think I know.
And worked in there.
He was
I
outcast
see.
from there as well, huh?
Mhm.
I was trying to remember, I used to be on the Kansas Notable Books Committee also, and some of the books we read there were like really interesting things, told really interesting stories about Kansas. And I think that's the kind of the whole paradox here, like the hayseed versus the
Non-hasty.
interesting, very different Kansas way of looking at the world kind of thing, you know?
It's, well, the way Kansas looks at the world, Robert Day and
Yeah.
his not in Kansas anymore, when I like what he said was, it is 106 in the sun. And then he says, we don't measure heat in the shade in western Kansas because we don't have much shade. That's kind of that
That would be the
tongue-in-cheek
point.
way of looking at it. So I think you're right. When I read, actually Antoinette and I arrived in Kansas approximately the same time, just a few years ago, and as you know, she's been the longest standing member of the book club. And she said she wanted to know more about it, and we did read one or two things that had a little bit about Kansas. I found that, and of course we read the one you're going to show us in a little while, the more political one, what happened to Kansas. But when I read this, I thought this was a great way to learn a lot more about it because we're doing it through the literature. Granted, those first couple essays. I was reminded that my grandfather was self-educated, and he did it by reading Emerson's essays and all those other things. And I thought, oh, I gotta keep going. This, my grandfather could do this, but it's very much fun. But when you get into Denise Lowe, and when you get into, you know, Inge, and you know, well, later ones of Robert Day, they're very good. But it is a way Thomas Fox Averill has put together kind of an easy path through the history, because they go back.
One of the interesting things he said, one of the authors said was, I think it might have been William Allen White, lack of cultural development in Kansas is sort of one of the things he said, that they didn't put that, I mean, they were survivors, you know, but they really weren't that much into
The art.
Because they were so worried about surviving.
I think so,
Yeah.
I think so. But that was one of his kind of worries.
Yeah, exactly.
So no big opera house and no big symphony or things like that.
We're gonna have a big one now.
Well, you
But
know,
that's in
Kansas.
Missouri.
Can't
count
Go ahead and count it.
Five
Yeah, that's
minutes
right.
away.
We're like the Twin Cities.
There you
Yeah,
go.
we'll go ahead and
They're
count.
kind of dry, like Puritan, you know.
Uh-huh. I think one of the books we had was Kansas Opera Houses, though, was one of the notable books. And there are some. Lots of unknown places in
I would
Kansas.
imagine.
Weird things too, of course.
Well, I did, you know, I moved here 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years in June from Utah, which has mountains. But you know, when I came, I just felt this freedom because it was, the mountains kind of hem you in, you know? And I felt this freedom. Because I was getting out of a bad marriage too.
So you liked your space.
But there was just this freedom, and I felt open.
You could,
You
the
know?
horizon was further
And
away.
the horizon was so big. Your sun goes down. I mean,
And the
everybody
sunsets,
said-
you know,
but
that's
you
one of the
know,
things they talk about.
Antoinette, I worked with a woman, and she was from the western part of our state, and she felt very hemmed in here.
Even here, with the trees and all the hills.
Complained about it a lot. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, this is the beautiful part of Kansas. We have trees and hills and, you know.
Well,
But
I was
know what you
surprised.
mean about the mountains. I hate the Rockies. I feel like they're gonna fall down on me.
I was surprised when I moved here in 2004 that it was so pretty. The sunsets were so extraordinary. Because I've lived in different parts. I grew up in Iowa, but I lived in, you know, Los Angeles, Texas, Minnesota. I'm from Iowa. I couldn't believe how beautiful the sunsets were, and how come I didn't know that? You know, here I am for
As you're looking west, then Kansas, you can see so far.
just the most
figure out which
magnificent
way was
sunsets
west.
I've ever seen anywhere. Even looking out on the Pacific, and how come no one ever talks about it?
Yeah.
That's what I was
Well,
a
it's
little
Because we're
shocked.
not cosmopolitan here, we're not.
Well, this is the problem. You guys have a little bit of a self-image problem.
We need to promote better.
Yeah, it came out in the book, and,
Yeah, well, we don't talk about it. She's
well,
right.
because I lived on both coasts. I lived in New York City and I lived in LA, okay? And so, you know, and they think they're really cool.
Mhm.
They sure do.
And
Yep.
I think, you know, the middle
I-
is nice.
Well,
I think that they think they can be cool because we're so practical here.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you know, it's easy to be
Right.
cool when you got states like Kansas and Missouri
The
backing
flyover
you up.
states.
Exactly. I mean, you know, we're the backbone. And I remember when Rita was talking to me about this, and I'll be honest, I did not even pick up the book because she was telling, I was like, Rita, I haven't read the book and I don't think I'm gonna read the book. But I knew I wanted to come, so then I started thinking about, I've lived here since I was 5, Kansas, what does it mean? I think, I don't know, because my grandparents lived here, you know, they were born in Hartsville, Missouri, then they came here. So, I don't know, I think maybe just like practical, you know, do what needs to be done, no nonsense. Maybe that's why we're not as culturally diverse and we don't have maybe a lot of that to offer. But I think it's people like us right here in the Midwest. I mean, when you think about what America's made of and who populates America, you think about places like Kansas, I think in Missouri, and places in the middle. You don't when you think about what America's going to, maybe you think about New York and LA because of all of the extravaganza and so much of it. I don't know, but I was just thinking of how it formed me as a person as opposed to anything else like that. That's the way I kind of attacked it.
And then calling this the heartland,
Mhm.
that was new to me, too,
Oh, yeah.
which it is.
The
Yeah.
breadbasket art.
Mhm.
Well,